Hello and welcome to DDOCast episode 357, recorded live on November 2nd. I'm your host, Patrick. With me this week we have from Turbine, Cordovan, aka Jerry Snook.
Hey. This means it's going to be a long show.
We're going to cruise with this. It'll be easy. Apologies for the delay, though. I had some technical difficulties, which you can interpret as I was not taking care of things in a timely manner. About that.
You might think they were waiting for me to shave, but the truth is I actually shaved yesterday. Shaving November 1st for Movember. We can maybe talk about that later.
I got that in the show notes later.
Okay.
This week's screenshot, Oxnardo wears his new epic armor and enters the Temple of Vol for Halloween. A nice pumpkin face. I don't actually know which armor that is, but it does look pretty snazzy.
Yeah, I don't know either.
The weapon is a little bit more snazzy to me, probably because my text is kind of chopping off the top of the sword. It's kind of like a really big, really short spear or something. We like to talk about Dungeons & Dragons online nearly every weekend. You can watch us through Google Plus Hangouts, YouTube, or from our website at DDOCast.com. DDOCast is hosted by CyberEars, the awesome podcast hosting network, and shows are usually available within a few days of recording. The next show will probably be next Saturday, and then probably next Saturday. And you can stay updated by following us on social media pages or our website at DDOCast.com with our calendar. On the podcast this week, we've got some Update 23 Patch 1 news, some additional Barbarian news, and our conversation this week will be Halloween-themed. We're going to talk about slaying undead.
Yes, and being slayed by undead.
Yeah, and being slayed by undead. Let's see, we'll start with game news. Update 23 Patch 1 is out. It came on Monday. Some of the highlights. Mirrors of Glamoring can now be used to create cosmetic shields and docents. As before, they're bound to account, and all racial requirements are retained. I think that mostly applies to docents.
Yes, right. Yeah.
And just to note, if you are doing a docent, the look of created cosmetic docents will change depending on the body feat of the Warforged wearing it, which is the way it normally works. In the same way, their associate armor change, blah, blah, blah. So if you make a glamored docent look, then it will change if you have based on if you're adamantine, composite, or mithril body feat. So you might like it on one of your Warforged, which has an adamantine feat, and you go to put it on one that has a composite or no feat. Composite is if you didn't take a feat, and you might not like the same look. So just be aware of that.
Yeah, right. And you know, it was really kind of a design question. Ultimately, we went with the one that was the most easy to implement and most consistent with what was already going on in the game. But you know, do you have, like, because some folks, let's say you really like the look on your adamantine body, perhaps you'd want that look on your mithril body, and I understand that. But there's also folks who would prefer it to look like the armor's supposed to look based on the Warforged wearing it, which is based on the body feat, which is how the game is already coded to work anyway, so it tended to be the option we chose. But I can understand why some folks would want it the other way around too. It's just one of those things. I think if we were recoding the game, maybe we wouldn't have Warforged with body feats, and we just put it in the docents or something like that. But it's not to be, at least in the short term here. So
yeah, that'd be a major rework.
It would be,
and it probably wouldn't be worth it either. Let's see. Yeah. Other things of note, I'm just going to skim some of this stuff. Perhaps my favorite note in a while, returning, such as on Thorn Weapons, is no longer considered a magical effect and is no longer suppressed by things like Mordenkainen's Distinction. So does that mean if it got disjuncted, you'd lose the dagger?
That's a very good question. I have never had it happen to me, so I don't know. But I think it was essentially that it lost the ability to be a returner, right? So essentially you couldn't use it. You'd chuck it once and it would be done, because the returning bit would not work again until you lost. I think if you logged out or something like that, it would come back. But I actually don't know. So I will say, you know, there's a note in there earlier. Smite Evil and Exalted Smite now both have a shorter animation. We are aware of some of the feedback, which is sort of wondering about the specific nature of that animation itself. Some people think maybe it's it pauses a little weirdly, and because there is sort of a natural duration to Smite Evil and Exalted Smite, and when we change the animation, I don't know if we necessarily synced it up to the time that passes when you hit the ability. You notice this particularly in the two-handed fighting, and it's something we're looking into. probably a future update. So.
Cosmetics, the glamored items will no longer count as exclusive, which is good. Let's
Yep.
see, what else in there? The Harper Agent tree should no longer be locking up every time a point is added, and there was
Yep.
much rejoicing there.
This is a minor one, but we have had glowing eyes now work on purple Dragon Knight characters. There's a couple of people in the game in particular who have been wanting that for a very long time, and so now they can get it. So there you go.
Yeah, I'm just so everyone listening knows, I'm not reading everything in here. I'm trying to skim through
No,
some
but
of
that
them.
is important.
So
it's is not important. It
yeah,
is
please.
not. It's important to a very small but vocal segment of our community.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to absolutely jump in on some of these that I skipped. There were a couple other enhancements, mostly to Paladins, Knight of the Chalice, and Vanguard's abilities relating to melee power and no longer damaging allies. That's always a fun one.
Yeah.
Assassin's Venom Blades enhancement should no longer be preventing sneak attacks, and there was much rejoicing there. I'm assuming that's mostly referring to if you're in sneak mode and then you attack or try to assassinate. Let's see.
Yeah. Particularly, this is we believe one of the main sources of interference with the assassinate ability. So hopefully we've corrected that.
Hirelings. There's a couple of things on hirelings. They will now resurrect allies automatically when possible. It is also now possible to specify a hireling to resurrect during combat or wait until combat has ended. I'm assuming that's an optional toggling thing in their UI now?
I believe so. Yep.
It's now possible to disable the pause in movement a hireling does when someone in the party is hit by a trap. So if you're running through the trap and you don't want them to pause in the trap, there you go. Hirelings told to stay will be more agreeable to that. More hirelings that can heal themselves no longer asks to be healed. Melee hirelings told to stand on their ground in the spot will no longer help their master when their master gets hit. They now respond better to debuffs and spells and respond more quickly to companions being hurt. Hirelings with repair will now repair Iron Defenders, and players can customize AI of their Iron Defenders and Druid companions, which is pretty awesome. And Iron Defenders with the Hunter of Boxes enhancement will now break boxes more reliably. If the character's Iron Defender stops breaking boxes, if you press the Come to Me button, they should be more agreeable to breaking boxes.
To put this in kind of plain language, there was a bug where Iron Defenders were going brain dead sometimes when they break a box and then just basically sit there and not do anything. And we attempted to fix that, and we largely fixed it, although we noticed that it does still sometimes happen. However, if you press the Come to Me button, it'll essentially reset their AI and has been allowing them to break boxes again.
And fun background, if you didn't know, Hunter of Boxes actually was a bug initially that they left in.
Yep.
I think they renamed it to Hunter of Boxes, but the fact that they would break boxes was not intentional.
Yeah, right, because they were doing it as part of their initial, way back when we first released Hirelings, like their combat AI script, and then one of the devs actually went in there and looked at it and said, we could actually make them do this if we wanted to, essentially preserve the bug and turn it into an enhancement. They were like, yeah, that sounds awesome, of course, right? Who doesn't want your Iron Defender to do all your box breaking for you? And so that's sort of how that one came about, but yeah.
Let's see, the Knives Eternal from the Mark of Death now allows players to add primary augment and secondary augment upgrade in either order, which is good. Players who had Epic Blade Marks Dosen or Heavy Chain Vertigo benefit change to plus 12 can now place those items into a Stone of Change and have them corrected. The material type on new named armors released on page 23 has been changed from Mithril to Steel. Note that these armors did not previously provide the Mithril benefit, but had the Mithril name associated in their material type. I'm assuming those were carryovers from their heroic versions.
Yeah, it's really a minor point. When you looked at your item description, and saw the duration, when it would have a type or whatever in that duration box, it was saying type Mithril, even though they weren't Mithril. And so it was really just a minor text change there.
There's now a general vendor in Evening Star,
hey,
which is nice.
Get your arrows.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what, though? That's actually an example of a forum thread leading to immediate change. There's a forum post, I don't know, within the last month or so, where someone said that they couldn't get arrows in Evening Star because they didn't have a general vendor there. And one of the devs read that and happened to have, an extra half hour or whatever it took to make the change. I was like, why don't we just put one in there? And that turned out great. So, yeah.
Certainly no complaints here.
Yeah.
Mental's plot device debuff no longer persists until the player relogs into the game. That's the one that debuffs you and gives you a stacking fire damage, which is
Yeah.
a constantly annoying one. Let's see, lines of supply. The Happy Matriarch no longer stops functioning if the player abandons their conversation after succeeding a skill check, which is nice. That's a great quest. I just ran that, actually. Let's see, what else we got in here? Image gallery images are no longer reset upon epic, iconic, or true reincarnation. I think you guys fixed these. We had a hot fix that fixed NPCs not giving end reward lists, which was on Thursday.
Yep. And that was the generally the entirety of that entire hotfix. We also had kind of an internal crash reporting issue, which would be when there was an instance crash, what kind of messaging was being sent internally. So we cleaned that up a little bit, but that's not really public facing. So those are really the only two things that were in the hotfix.
Excellent. So that was kind of the release, the update. So Barbarians, there was a bit of ongoing discussion with the Barbarian enhancement changes, and I will try and skim through some of this reading. There was a discussion. This is kind of overall for all of the three trees. They had a discussion about whether they wanted to take the Barbarians down the path of the quote glass cannon route, and decided they didn't want an entire class that had no self-sufficiency. Particularly because they didn't feel that it fits well with how DDO is currently played. None of the other classes are cut off from activating self-healing abilities by a major class feature, i.e. Rage, which is kind of where all the healing is coming from. Of all the abilities in the Barbarian trees, they expect Blood Strength to take the most tweaking to get right. So they're kind of going to keep working on some of that. And they're this is all still in discussion. They're making a lot of tweaks. The reason why they didn't move the healing application hit point bonuses to the main class is that they wanted the Barbarian to spend points in more than one tree to be able to double up on the bonuses. So yeehaw there.
Mm-hmm.
And the discussion about the direction of this, where they were taking some of this, Barbarians and Pen and Paper have always been more about hit points, and they decided to go in that direction because it's more traditional to their survival kind of technique. They could have used DR, but it's kind of a bad mechanism to boost higher in the game. It's either too powerful or not good enough, depending on if you're facing a lot of small creatures or heavy-hitting bosses. Hit points works well in all cases. And so then to balance that with the healing, with more hit points, they wanted to kind of address healing application, which kind of fits in with their primal class tree. Let's see, there were questions about temporary hit points, DR, PRR, and dodge as alternatives, and they basically just didn't fulfill the goals for the class. PRR kind of makes them the same as defender trees, and they didn't want to do that. Temporary hit points doesn't work well with healing potions or promoting teamwork because they don't really affect healing. DR, as we said, scales poorly, and they felt that they had plenty of dodge-based builds options in the game already. So they wanted to kind of spend time focusing on making them a different martial class, so they went with hit points and healing amp. So yeah, those are fairly good choices, and I have no complaints in that regards. I like hit points, I like hitting things hard, and healing amp is great for Barbarians.
There's been a lot of discussion on the forums, I think, in the past week and a half or so about whether or not Barbarians are currently, I would say not even whether or not, what position do they rank in terms of overall DPS in the game, right? There are some folks on the forum feedback threads on the Barbarian in particular who are telling us that they maybe feel Barbarian needs a DPS boost on top of all this other kind of thing. There's even some people who say they need to not only have the highest hit points, but also have the highest DPS in the game. And that, frankly, is probably not going to happen due to basic balance. But I think there is a question, particularly the question we'd like to get feedback on once this hits Lamania, so you can actually play it. about where you feel their DPS ranks and whether they do need a DPS boost. I mean, if you ask someone, do you want to do more damage? Yes, but when you try to look at things like class balance, is this going to be enough? I mean, the numbers that we have seen internally, uh, prior in particular to update 23, which, of course, brought in a huge amount of changes to melee combat, is that barbarians are frankly in a, well, like I say, I don't want to give too much of an opinion here, but it seems like barbarians are largely in a fairly good position DPS-wise. And I know there are some folks who will disagree with that, but I think internally our data is telling us that we should think they're close to it, and they are getting a bit of a melee boost, in these new enhancement trees. But particularly if you've when you test this out on Lamania, and actually see the numbers, if you still feel that they are just not competitive enough in DPS, then we'd like to hear that feedback. Or if you feel they're not, we'd want to hear that too, right? So
I feel like the DPS is still solid. Although I think the one thing I would like to see more out of the enhancement trees is more two-handed fighting bonuses. There's not a lot of that. And I think if you look at other weapon styles in the game, different classes support those in different manners and better than most, right? So single weapon fighting is really well supported in Swashbuckler. Archery, of course, is supported well in range, and two weapon fighting or in Ranger. Two weapon fighting is also pretty well supported in Ranger with their Tempest tree. And there's other kind of thing like Sword and Board is now really well supported with Vanguard. And I think that I would love to see barbarians get more stuff in their enhancement tree associated with two-handed fighting. That would be kind of my personal choice of direction. And so there is some of that in there in one of the trees at least. But I've always kind of, and this is the way that I've always played my barbarian too. So that is certainly coloring some of this opinion. Again, not that it should be. That should be the main focus, but I'd like to see more bonuses in terms of two-handed fighting, because I think a barbarian, particularly when you get into a large group of mobs, you run in with a two-handed weapon, you start cleaving, and you've got the supreme cleave ability and stuff, and all your stuff applying to that. You can get some pretty big crits and do a lot of damage to a lot of monsters in a group, which also really fits well with the theme of a barbarian, right?
Yeah, right.
Wade into a huge group of kobolds and just start swinging and kill or be killed. That's how I like to think of barbarians.
Nice.
And that's how I play mine too. So
yeah.
So feel free to take that feedback back to the devs there.
I think in general, there's an goal of maybe boosting damage in ways that aren't weapon style specific. Now, obviously, that was not the case with Bard. Bard was very specifically built for, say, single weapon fighting in some ways, in terms of its overhaul. But I think in general, there's an attempt to be like, well, whether you're two-handed or two-weapon or single weapon or whatever you choose, we want to be able to, when we do DPS boosts in these trees, to maybe make it a little more universal than that. But yeah,
there's also, I should point out too, that some of the things that are talking about changing do support two-handed fighting in a very different manner, or in kind of a backdoor manner. As case in point with the Ravager, they're looking at, one of the things they're looking at, let's see, where is it? So this is kind of what they're thinking for blood strength ability. Each time you land a hit, there's a 20% chance you are healed for a number of hit points equal to your barbarian level. Each time you kill an opponent, you're also healed for the same amount. Healing scales 100% power. And the nice thing about this, the 20% chance is a good way to balance the ability if it proves too strong or too weak. So with that, every time you land a hit, okay, does that include glancing blows? It certainly would include cleave and stuff like that. So if you're using a two-handed weapon and you're in a big group of mobs, you can cleave and swing, and that'll take effect a lot more often. Probably more so than a two-weapon fighter attacking just one single mob.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to the question of whether grazing hits count for this enhancement. I need to ask the dev who's working on it, but I don't know. I wouldn't even hazard a guess.
Yeah, I'm not sure, to be honest. But it's I don't know. That's just kind of where my 2 cents. I'd love to see that two-handed fighting play a little bit more in at least one of the lines. I don't think it wants to be in all three of the lines because that wouldn't make sense, and it doesn't. That's how the other trees tend to work. There's like one tree. There's one tree for every weapon style in the game, other than two-handed fighting, really, that really excels at that style. And I think barbarian
Yeah.
would be an appropriate place to stick that. Let's see
We can
other stuff that they're
rename
doing.
we can rename Ravager to Big Weapon Hit Stuff.
I don't know if that's necessarily required, but um, other things from the Ravager tree to increase the value of the capsule. They're looking at make Visage of Terror and AOE attacks centered on the Barbarian. If the Paralyze isn't working, they'll need to fix that. Obviously, they are looking to change the force damage to Bane damage. Um, and I think that was kind of all for that tree. For the Frenzy tree, they're considering some of these changes based on feedback. The final core would lose the rage regeneration. Instead, it would gain, in addition to the passive abilities and Stormite, the ability, when raging, your melee attacks that roll a 20 do an extra 400 damage, which scales with 100% melee power. Big numbers. The Tier 5 multi-selector would lose the Perfect Rage and gain the following as an alternative choice to Accelerated Metabolism. When raging, you deal +1 weapon damage. Yeehaw. And that's really, Frenzy has always kind of been my favorite tree, and I think that's where the two-handed fighting is. But
That's the one
Barbarian,
we've certainly had the
numbers.
most feedback on, is that tree of the three of them. Leads me to think we have a lot of frenzied berserkers in game.
It's, I would say that one and Ravager are probably the two most popular. I think the Occult Slayer is probably the weakest of the three,
Yeah.
and probably so by a long shot. And that's
Yeah, you
okay.
were mentioning that last week or the week before, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things that there's some fun defensive stuff in there and some flavory stuff, and I don't necessarily want to see it go away. And I know it's not necessarily a problem. I just think it's one of the weaker ones. Like there's some fun stuff in there, um, so it has its place. But I think the other two, most people play a barbarian. They're going more defensively or more offensively minded, um, and my defense against the caster is I'm going to kill it
Yeah.
really fast. So that, having said that, there's some. I think I actually on my current barbarian have more enhancements in Occult Slayer than I do in Ravager. He's Frenzy Berserker's his primary tree. Because again, my barbarian is two-handed fighting. I want big numbers and lots of hit points. Those are kind of the three design choices that, or three kind of overarching things that define my choices with that character. So bigger crits, I like bigger crits.
I have to admit, I am not a barbarian expert. I'm not even sure if I've ever played a barbarian. We're beyond the first few levels, to be honest. I'm terrible for this one. I don't know. I just have never really played it. Even back in the days of the Batman build, I didn't really play a Batman build, so I don't know.
If you
I'm
like
learning
big,
with everyone, so
yeah, I would say kind of an answer to the question that you were asking earlier. Barbarians, to me, their DPS is big numbers. It's
yeah.
spike damage. It's decent overall against one monster, right?
Hmm.
Obviously, if you're doing two-handed fighting, they're going to be better against a large group of monsters because that's how they play. That's how that style works. And there's a lot of things in the tree that are effective to that, like Supreme Cleave. But I think the way that barbarians tend to play is, uh, I have a lot of hit points, and I'm going to have big damage. When I crit, I crit big. I do
Yeah.
big damage, um, which is also, I like seeing big numbers. It may not be as much DPS as something like a faster two-weapon fighter overall, but the big numbers are always fun to see.
Yeah.
Let's see, bugs. There was so this is just kind of general QA information. I don't even remember what this was addressing, but there was an issue that's
It's addressing the cost of upgrading an item in Evening Star, uh, where it was the person. I don't. I'm trying to go off the top of my head. I can't remember the name of the item off the top. They were trying to upgrade, I believe, the ancient gemstone. Is that it?
I
And
don't
it
know.
was supposed to take 5 of the widgets,
One
and
of a
the
combination.
person hit the button, and claimed it took 10, and got in touch with support. Support sent them to submit a bug on it, and it appears that maybe what the issue is that you can actually click it multiple times. And of course, after you click it on subsequent times, you don't get the upgrade because you've already upgraded the weapon. And so it's possible to spend essentially more than expected on upgrading that item. But when we went in to check, it actually does require the 5 widgets as it appears in the list and everything. It's just that you have the opportunity, if you click too often or whatever, to spend more than that.
Yeah, so this is just kind of general information that I pulled out of one of the responses from the QA guys. This issue was submitted via the in-game help menu and looked into by a GM. At the time, it did not appear to be something that they could resolve, so it was suggested a bug report be filed to log additional information and research what could have caused the issue to occur in the first place. Once the bug report was submitted, QA took a look and worked with CS, which stands for
Customer service.
To figure out how to possibly resolve the issue. They came up with a workaround and were able to then help the poster. In all honesty, this thread was noticed after they had already begun to address the issue again in game, but did provide a good opportunity for QA to jump in and explain what might have caused it. So to answer the last question, it was a combination of efforts from customer service and QA. Submitting an in-game ticket is always the best way to initially report an issue. If it's something that customer service can immediately assist with, they definitely will. Some issues cannot be resolved immediately and require additional research and may be something that can only be fixed in a future update or hotfix. Those are the type of issues that the QA team works to address when they receive bug reports from players. So I just kind of wanted to share that because I thought it was a good explanation of how those two departments kind of work together to resolve issues. Let's see, bonus days for the week. +2 loot, and the Cove is going on. That's through today, the day of the recording, November 2nd.
Yep. Having run some of the Cove on Friday night, helping out some guildies on Thelanis about to really want to get these items made before it goes away. It's very nice right now if you want to collect your dragon shards, because that Crystal Cove mining challenge is opening up within minutes, typically, of when it closes the last time because of our extremely low turn-in rates. So if you want to stockpile, or if you want to get those items in, now's a good time to do it, because you can actually get a lot done in a couple hours in regards to progress towards your upgrade or building a weapon or what have you.
Yeah, the turn-in rate was turned down to 500 on most servers and 250 on Wayfinder, so it makes it really easy. Although the one thing I was disappointed at that didn't come with bonus days is I haven't seen any pumpkin and skull beholders this year.
Yeah, you haven't, and the reason for that is the thing that causes that to happen is the same switch that causes the Delara's Graveyard area to turn into Maybar. And since we're not doing Maybar this Halloween, we couldn't bring back the pumpkin beholders because it's the same world property, essentially.
Sad face.
Yep.
Although, on the upside, skull and pumpkin grenades are in the store. And +4 UMD tomes have been made permanent in the store as well. If you're running, they cost just shy of 1,500 turbine points.
UMD.
This rate, +4. It's about 4-1. Sales through November 6th on Thursday. 25% off of augments, jewelers' toolkits, hair dyes and styles, cosmetic armors, cosmetic hats, helms, and headwear, and omni-spell dusts and stones. And the freebie for the week is a double-duty hair reversion tonic, which is hair 31, 1 per account. I'm assuming that's a dye and style removal.
Yes.
But I'm not.
Yeah.
I don't usually use hair dyes, so.
Yeah, I've never used one of those either, but I assume that sounds right. I have long, expressed my belief in being a member of the Omnispell cult. I very much love my Omnispell dusts and stones, and I do have the advantage that I often use my free turbine points on it. So I can understand that if it's costing you real money, maybe you're hesitant to use those Omnispell dusts and stones. But for those of you who are willing to pick up a whole lot of them for pretty darn cheap, it's now 25% more off. So maybe I'll win a couple of converts this time. 1 inventory space taken up for all your spell components. Well, except for the special ones.
That's what the stones are for, right?
Ones are for. So you pick up a couple thousand each, and it's not that much money. Can't even actually let me check in game right now because I happen to have my client up. Omnispell. It is currently 38 turbine points for 50 of them. If you want 2,500 Omnispell Dust, it's 375 turbine points. And if you want 1,000 Omnispell Stone, that's 300. So 300 and 675 turbine points for 2,500 Omnispell Dust and 1,000 Omnispell Stone. And that'll do you for a while. So if you've got that kind of money, maybe some free turbine points, maybe you watch the live stream and get lots of free points from me. I got to tell you, they're really nice to use. I really like those things. Just saying. I'm not trying to hard sell you. I'm just saying that they have made my DDO experience infinitely better, and you're a loser if you don't have them. So.
I have some, but I usually put them behind all my normal stacks. So if I run out, they'll start ticking away. But I only use the ones that I've gotten for free. So. I don't generally.
Yeah, I understand. Right? Not everyone's in the position I am in regards to being able to say, yeah, that makes things easy. But you get an awful lot of them. So.
Yeah, no, if you have to buy spell ingredients because you ran out in a quest, get those because then you have to read on what level you hit them.
Yeah, especially because you get like I just said, you can get 50 of them for like 30 turbine points, which is pretty cheap in regards to I'm in the middle of a quest and all of a sudden don't have X material. So.
The 116th Chronicle, Ginger Spices gave away 5 million plat yesterday with an event on Solana. Failed Legend is putting together a list of great-looking armors from the Mirror of Glamoring. Both those guys have been on DDOcast. Mark Crowns has created
Mark
a
DDO 747, maybe.
Yeah, he created a DDO-themed pumpkin. You can check that out. I think that was the Beholder one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sounds about right. Rare Encounters is a wilderness-focused guild on Solana looking for other explorers. The guild focuses on DDO's wilderness areas for XP and fun, and is looking for like-minded players. Those are fun to run in a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Videos for the week. The Unheroics headed to Red Willow's ruins. Check that out. The comment for the week. The 12 have created a new type of candy. What is it, and how does it taste? Go ahead, Jerry.
Uh-oh. I'm never prepared for my own question. Their new type of candy is... Astral Plane cotton candy, and it tastes indescribable.
All right, I'm gonna go with Beholder Eyeballs, and they have a nice hard chocolate on the dark chocolate on the outside, and a random magical or a potion of wonder like effect on the inside.
Nice.
Yeah, Fanside
I wonder
News.
why I did this. Yeah, there you go.
The DDO guys have joined DDO Stream, which we'll talk about how you can do that in a minute. Your DDO is back, so you can look at those guys. The Order of Skletica was looking at stealth ops and diplomatic impunity.
Kill one guy, win the quest.
That's pretty. Yeah, you can do that. That's you only got to kill the last guy in that one. So.
Yep, and he explains how to do
it. We looked at Pets and Hirelings last week on our show, and DDO Players News episode 5 looked at this week's patch as well. Let's see. The Bacon forums are also back from the dead. You can check out the zombie Bacon forums, and happy Halloween.
I'll probably be turning those off tomorrow sometime.
They're fun little bacon-themed threads.
Yeah, I think it was Livmo on the forums who initially gave me the idea to bring it back. They're like, we should have the Bacon forums back for Halloween. And I was like, I could do that. And then I thought about making them the zombie Bacon forums. And decided what the heck. So.
Videos this week. There was a community update video on October 31st, Halloween. There was with the weekly Wednesday this week went to Spooky House J. So I'm running some of the House J walk-ups. And then the Fall Fling went to Menectarin for the walk-ups there as well. So you can check all of those out. And I hear that there is a slip of the tongue in the weekly Wednesday one, somewhere around 56 minutes.
You. I can neither confirm nor deny the visual and audio proof that might exist.
Some of the blogs this week. DDO Gamer was looking at the history of barbarians in his kind of initial reaction to the enhancements. Your DDO, as mentioned, has migrated. He just wanted to chime in and let everyone know that your DDO is fully migrated to new servers and up and running. Special things of note: the character stats and guild list pages were removed since they no longer work without the API. Added a link to our DDO blogging site. And if everything goes as planned, he will be back for the third annual holiday giveaway shortly after Thanksgiving. Let's see. And of course, Players Alliance 5th episode was this week on Monday as well. Those guys are doing a great job. Continue the great work there. And they gave us a nice shout out as well this week. Forum topics. There was a video on how to do the Mark of Death tiles. It's basically the Abbott version of the goggles puzzle, but it's a lot easier and much more forgiving, and you don't really even need the goggles to do it sometimes if you're
Yeah. I mean,
Although
actually, there's a part of me that feels we're being too wimpy on that death water. But then there's also the practical side of me, which remembers the old, heroic elite Abbott, and it was basically one-shot death, right? And so, but the fact that you can really just not even wear the goggles and just sort of douse yourself in destructive water until you happen to jump on the right platform doesn't really sit well with me.
On normal even it's not I mean, it's more forgiving, but you can't stay in there for very long. It'll get you pretty good. I think the thing that's more indicative of making it easier is people from the main platform can cocoon you and give you a little help to get out. I think that's kind of more of indicative of making that a little easier. But I think the water hurts more on harder difficulties too. But
it does. Yeah. And typically the people who can beat that are able to absorb that water just fine too. But that's fine, But really what the video does is it helps explain to you what signs to look for in terms of which tiles you can just stand on, which ones are going to disappear. What do the goggles do? Maybe you've never been the guy in the raid that's having to wear the goggles. And so it's a quick little video. It's like maybe just a little over a minute. And it's a real good, helpful primer for anyone who's not really familiar with the Abbott goggles. So
I will say this though, it's fairly easy to, if you know what you're doing, to do it without the goggles. I mean, even then, it's not a foolproof thing. I mean, I see people die in it pretty much every run trying to do it. So it's not like people don't die in it even then. But if you don't know what you're doing, it's really hard. So even people that for the first couple times even with the goggles, they have to learn how to do it. So there's a learning curve there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Other stuff going on. Galanda's Veterans Day observation will be on November 11th at 3 p.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Galanda's House Deneth. It will be in Galanda's House Deneth Temple of the Sovereign Host. And the Tears Palladium Guild is a guild filled with many proud veterans from many nations. Once again, wishes to welcome everyone to join them to pay tributes to veterans and their families from the United States, as well as those from nations around the world who risk their life and limb to fight for human dignity and freedom. They just kind of gather to further that cause and appreciation to those whose lives are on the line each and every day, and allow them to wake yet another day to hug their families, kids, parents, and do whatever they like to do. So if you'd like to be a part of that, you can hop on there as well. And then there will be a Movember. Jerry is doing Movember this year.
Yep. But hence the shaving. I shaved starting November 1st. But I have to admit, I am very unprepared. So, whereas last year I had, like donation tiers, and if you donate this much, I can do this for you, and all that sort of thing. I just don't have any of that right now.
So more details forthcoming. However,
exactly.
I think if the entire DDO community managed to raise $10,000, Jerry will shave the DDO logo into his head.
You know what? If we raise $10,000, I absolutely will do that. Yep.
And there we go.
Absolutely, I will do that.
There's a goal, folks.
I'm promising that right now. I will actually shave the DDO logo in my head if we raise $10,000 for November. I think I'm actually going to set my goal lower than that. Probably 1,000 or two, just to see if we can meet that goal first, and then see what else we can do. And I'm going to try to do something for the community here. I just haven't quite figured out what yet. So, but it's a good cause. Movember supports men's health, say cancer research, mental health research, various ailments that are common for men to sort of suffer. And you can find out specifically what kinds of prostate cancer, testicular cancer, mental health programs that they have contributed to from their website. That's Movember.com. And they also have all sorts of pretty good about being transparent about, like, say, their annual reports are all available online. You can find out how much the donation goes for administrative costs, that kind of thing. And like I say, specifically, you can look up where the donations went for the last fiscal year, and that as well. So if you want to find out more about Movember, you can go to Movember.com. And I'm going to have a link on the forums within the next couple of days here to my specific Movember page, and you can donate to that any amount that you feel you can do. Would be much appreciated. So it went really well last year, and the DDO community really turned out with a lot of support last year. So hopefully we can do that again this year. It's an important cause.
The other thing going on these days, you may remember that over the past couple of months I was asking questions and surveying people. That was for DDOcast Guild Feud, which that episode will play in a week or two.
Oh, good.
3 or 4 weeks.
I've been waiting to hear that one.
It was pretty entertaining. But what you can do right now, there is a survey that you can go and take and answer those same 10 questions that I asked the people on the show. And the top 3 people, you get points based on if you answer what the most people answer, or however many people answer what you say, you get points. It's just like the game Family Feud, if you're familiar with that. And so the top 3 point scorers will get some prizes, and then everyone else will be automatically entered to win more prizes. And then there are 10 Turbine Point codes and 10 Snowy Owlbear codes up for grabs. The top 3 winners will get a large portion of those, but there are others there as well. And I think right now it's at about like 40 to 50 people, so there's a pretty good chance that you could win something that way. And we'll link to that in the show notes. Tell your friends. We had a lot of fun recording it, and it was kind of some interesting responses, to say the least.
Yeah, I bet.
There's some interesting data collected there. Let's see. With that, we're going to talk about a Halloween-themed roundtable discussion. We're going to talk about fighting undead, because it was something I thought of off the top of my head this morning, and it'll be fun. And it's Halloween-themed, so hey, here we go. So we have a list of undead things that we fight, and just kind of some tips on and some things to know about fighting them. Some of this will be more helpful for newer players, but some of the older vets might find some of this useful as well. So let's start with everyone's favorite skeletons. They're pretty much all over the place, and they range in size from the normal size ones all the way up to the giant ones that you run into. I think mostly in Madstone Crater would be probably the iconic place to find those. The thing to know about skeletons is you need bludgeoning weapons. That's kind of the main thing about them.
You don't need bludgeoning weapons, but if you don't like looking at yellow damage, then you need bludgeoning weapons. I mean, there's a lot of times, particularly if they're kind of trash mob skeletons, I'll just sort of use whatever I have and just accept the reduced DPS because they're dying pretty quick anyway. But particularly on tougher skeletons, or if you're at low levels and just starting out maybe, or aren't super geared up or whatever, having a bludgeoning weapon really will make a big difference on that. The other thing I guess I'd add about skeletons that's a good thing to know is you can't really do cold damage on them very well. They're immune to cold, and so because they're already dead, right? So they're as cold as they're going to get, and so usually can't use any cold attacks on them.
I think there are some variations of skeletons too. Like there are some that are actually cold skeletons, which I believe take double damage from fire, although they're still immune to cold. There's blackbone.
They do.
They're blackbone skeletons, which are, I think they're immune to lightning and fire, but I think they take cold damage. I'm not positive on that.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I can't quite remember that one off the top of my head. But the other thing to note about skeletons too is they tend to beat up your weapons pretty good. particularly at higher difficulties. The Catacombs has a quest. I think it's the fourth one when you go into Dryden's family tomb, and there's just skeletons everywhere. And if you might want to take an extra weapon into that quest, particularly if you're running out on elite and you're newer to the game, because skeletons can beat up your weapons pretty good.
Yeah.
Zombies are kind of the opposite. You need slashing is their DR, so you have a slashing weapon that does better damage against them, because they're kind of just meat sacks.
Yeah.
And they're kind of varying throughout the game. Although I will plug one thing in here. I'm still slightly disappointed that the drowned in Red Fens are just normal zombies, and they don't make you breathe underwater like they do in Pen and Paper. I was really looking forward to that. Would have been kind of fun. But I don't know, there's not really much else to say about zombies.
Again, they're
one of the
usually not
bosses
too
is one.
difficult to handle. Zombies are, they're fairly easily turnable. You can very susceptible to wall of fire. You can just mince them up with blade barrier. To be honest, zombies are one of our easier mobs in the game, I think.
And
But
they're that way in
again,
Pen
you
and
don't
Paper
want to
too.
try to beat them up with a club, particularly if you're low level and whatever. So
Yeah, and in Pen and Paper, they move really slow. Like they can only take one action unless they charge. I'm trying to remember if they charge in DDO. I don't think they really do.
no, they just sort of lumber
Yep.
around. Yeah.
They're an easy mob, and they're always kind of intended to be that way.
Yep.
Ghouls and ghasts, which are kind of similar. Um, they both do disease, and they both do paralysis attacks, although elves are immune to the ghouls' paralysis attack. And I think they generally nauseate as well if you fail a save for that, although it's usually pretty low. But again, they're kind of a low-level undead monster. There's no DR to worry about with these guys. They're pretty easy to take on.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. I kind of did this in a really weird order. Um, undead rats are kind of similar. I think you mostly run into those in the necropolis. They're just undead rats. They're not zombies per se. I don't think they have DR. Can't remember, but they're pretty easy monster to defeat.
Yeah, they might have bludgeon DR as well, or or slashing DR as well, but I'm not sure about that. I need to look that up.
Yeah, some of these I didn't look up. I just kind of grabbed the list from DDO Wiki. But yeah, undead rats are usually pretty easy to deal with, anyways. If they have DR, it's not too difficult to overcome.
Yeah,
Let's see. No, I
it's
think
a
I'm just gonna
rat.
follow my.
It might be dead, but it's not like they're all that much greater when they're alive. It's a rat. But
Let's talk about shadows, because you run into those for the low levels as well. Um, there's a couple different things about shadows. They come in a couple different styles because there's the older Forgotten Realms style that's pretty common, particularly if you're in the second Necro set. And then there's kind of the newer style of shadows that are more in Wayloon and Stormhorns, which are graphically a little more interesting and kind of act more like you would expect shadows from pen and paper. The other ones tend to be just shadowy versions of monsters like rats and gargoyles. They are incorporeal, so you need ghost touch against them, and they fade in and out, much to the annoyance of players. But they are generally vulnerable to light damage. So if you can pull out some light damage, that usually works pretty well against shadows.
mm-hmm. And you're talking about like say the the undead shadow, not what about the Shadowfell shadows are a little different, right?
They do behave a little
Yeah.
differently. They're still undead, um, and they behave functionally more like you would expect a shadow from pen and paper to behave. The kind of the rat and gargoyle versions basically are rats and gargoyles that kind of phase in and out as ghosts do. So they don't really behave any different than their counterparts other than that, at least in general.
This might be a good time to bring up incorporeal as well, incorporeal, because this is the first mob in our list that has incorporeality. So essentially, what that means is, regardless of what your die roll is, you have a 50% chance of automatically missing the target. Almost like, say, essentially the way displacement works on you. When you've got displacement cast on yourself and a creature tries to attack you, right off the bat, 50% chance to just plain miss.
Although it should be
So,
noted that those are different channels.
yes.
Incorporeality is not the same as they work functionally the
Yeah.
same. It's just a different channel. So
Yep.
if you have displacement and blur are a concealment bonus, whereas incorporeality is an incorporeality bonus. So they
Yeah.
do stack.
Yeah, absolutely. I just mean in terms of mechanically the way it works. And this, incorporeal undead enemies, have this on them. And how do you get past it? Well, there's a couple of different ways. Historically, in DDO's early days, the main way was Ghost Touch. If you had Ghost Touch property on a weapon, then you can, basically bypass that whole shebang and just attack them like you normally would. It would bypass that 50% chance to automatically miss. When we had the Ghost Bane of weapons and we sort of fixed up Ghost Bane, we then added Ghost Bane to have that same weapon bypass the mischance of incorporeal creatures. So Ghost Bane also works in addition to Ghost Touch. And
Ghost Bane also does extra damage.
yeah, in general, between the two, you'll want to go with Ghost Bane. Uh, Probably, right? And then if you have an item with ethereal, like the spectral gloves or the ethereal bracers, that will also bypass this incorporeality chance, as long as right, and then
Yeah, there's
right
there's
about
the
that.
ethereal property, which is on the
Yeah, right.
gloves from Nectaran, and there's also a set of bracers from Heroic Orchard that have that as well. And then there's kind of an epic version of that, which is Ghostly, which it does the same thing and bypasses that, but it also gives you 10% incorporeality as well. And that's on a number of items, like the Epic Stalker ring from the House C challenges, which is a really nice ring. There's boots in the High Road. I think there's some new stuff in the Epic Orchard that has it. The Ethereal Bracers, I believe, have it. There's a cloak out of the Giant Hole that has it as well. It's around.
So when it comes down to it, do you need Ghost Touch, Ghost Bane? No. If you don't mind, especially if you're spiking out a lot of damage, right? Maybe you just need to hit it a few times and it'll probably be dead. So in that case, maybe it's not worth, preparing too much for having Ghost Bane and all that sort of thing in your toolbox. You can just sort of miss that 50% and still take down the mob without significant risk. But particularly if you are in a quest with a lot of these kind of creatures, or maybe you're running something on Epic and it's really important that you have more sustained DPS and that kind of thing, then really you want to make sure that you've got this on something. And nowadays, with weapons being the way they are, you're probably better off, say, going ethereal or something on a item property than making sure you've got a Ghost Touch version of all your items. Although it depends. If you're crafting something up and you're crafting up an Undead beater, fine. That'll probably get you by, right? But it kind of depends
There's
on
certainly
sort of
certain
what your tactic
areas.
is.
There's certainly certain areas that you definitely want to have an option for that. And I would say my golf bag of weapons selections has certainly shrunk a lot in the past 2 years. But having a ghost, a weapon that can attack ghosts, either on an item or on just one weapon that you can pull out, is still something that I keep on all of my characters.
Yeah. Yep.
And the Epic Stalker ring is not too hard to get with a Ghostly either. And it may even have it on some of the heroic versions. I'm not positive on that.
Right.
But the first tier of it has it, and it's a couple hundred, or I think it's like 600 of 3 different mats that aren't. They're not too difficult to get. So, and there's other options as well, like we were talking about. Let's see. Let's talk about Cinder Spawns, which I'm always going to have a fun thing in my heart because I use them in pen and paper as a DM occasionally, which was kind of fun. Cinder Spawns are essentially an undead fire elemental, and I'm a little sad that it's like the only elemental that there's an undead version of. They never made undead versions of other elementals. They are still fire elementals though, so they are vulnerable to cold, but fire heals them, which is kind of deceptive because they have a cold shield on them. So it looks like you wouldn't want to use. Well, I mean, it kind of indicates you wouldn't use fire on them. But I don't know, it's just kind of a weird thing. You wouldn't associate them with it being vulnerable to cold damage because they're blue and they have a blue cold shield on. So
Yeah, yeah.
they also do enervation, which can be kind of a tricky thing. Um, I don't know if you want to add anything to those. They have
No,
stomp
that sounds
attacks.
right. You don't. There aren't a ton of Cinder Spawn in the game, but there's a couple of them. Some of the new update 23 stuff too. But really, you tend to fight them more often than anything as like a boss
Yeah,
style.
Inferno, the Dam, and Orchard are kind of the places you really run into them. They're not around very much. Same with Doomspheres, which are essentially a beholder, except they're undead. They're incorporeal again, which is kind of a trick, as if beholders needed to be more difficult to kill. Um, and they're not aberrations; they're undead, which is kind of a key thing. And you actually see this theme throughout a lot of undead monsters. Undead generally, the way undead works is you can have a creature and then you make it undead, either through a skeleton, a doomsphere, like cinder spawns. Again, all these things they have a base, like an actual live form, and then you turn them into undead, and they lose that whatever type they were before, and they become undead. Which means anything that, even if it, with a normal beholder, you can use something with I don't even know if it's in the game. Aberration Bane would do extra damage to them. It does not do extra damage to a Doomsphere because a Doomsphere is undead. However, you can disrupt a Doomsphere,
Yep.
assuming it's not named, which most of them are. Um, I think Mark of Death is probably where you're going to run into the non-named ones more than anywhere else in the game. And you can implode them, which is kind of funny because you shouldn't be able to. So clerics, be aware that you can implode Doomspheres.
And again, I believe they're vulnerable to. Are they vulnerable to light damage as well? I believe so, right?
I don't I
No,
don't know off the top of my head.
I don't know. My tactic, particularly when I'm on a healer type, is just to use lots of divine punishment on Doom Spheres. Get it starting to proc from a distance. Then even if you get, within their anti-magic range, you're okay. But it's a little tricky to get it to proc, but you can usually get it to proc if you're being strategic. And then you don't even have to worry about getting close to them. They can just kill you and still take damage. So, yeah.
So let's talk about liches, because liches are kind of a pain. Oh, I should mention, Doomsters I think are immune to electric and cold. Those are the two elements they're immune to. Liches are also immune to electric and cold. They usually have DR of bludgeoning and good. Although the wiki says bludgeoning and magic, but I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be bludgeoning and good for the most part. They're usually bosses. They often have a cold shield on them, and other. Sometimes they have a mantle of invulnerability, which makes them immune to certain low-level spells. They do also have a melee. They're usually casters. That's kind of their main thing, but they have a paralytic touch as well, so they can paralyze you if they slap you in the face. So those are the kind of things to be aware of for those.
Liches tend to be among the bigger baddies in the undead world.
Yep. And spectral dragons typically are, I think they're actually classified as liches in pen and paper, but I'm not positive on that. But they typically have very similar attributes, except the fact that they're a dragon. They usually have a breath weapon and all that stuff. Liches and spectral dragons are kind of unique in Doomspheres too, in that usually when you become undead, you lose a lot of your special abilities. That's not true of liches. Liches and spectral dragons keep a lot of their natural abilities, like breathing fire and spellcasting, which would be things that you'd normally lose if you become undead. Let's talk about mummies. Mummies are kind of a pain in the butt, and I don't know if you can I don't know if you can really get them anymore, but the hand sanitizers that they had as a promotion, which made you immune to disease for like 20 minutes, were great for fighting mummies. That was a special thing that they did for a convention a while back. Mummy's biggest thing is, well, they can have two main things you have to be aware of. One is their despair. If you're in the vicinity of a mummy, you have to make a save versus fear check, and if you fail, you become held as helpless. It's not being held the same way as like a hold monster, but you become helpless and can't move, which can be very problematic. The other thing is their curse, their mummy rot curse. which is a disease, but it's also a curse. So if you just chug a disease potion, uh, it doesn't. It comes back.
Hmm.
You have to use a remove curse potion, a remove curse, then a remove disease, or it comes back. So that's something to be aware of.
Alphabetical. C before D. Curse before disease.
Yeah, it's important that you do it in that or in that. I think you have to do it in that order too.
Yep. Otherwise, it'll reproc at the end of the 30-second sort of refresh rate, or it's a minute refresh rate.
Something like that. It's also worthy of note that a lot of mummies curses, like the curse part of that disease, makes you less easy to heal. Like reduces your incoming healing by about 50%, which can be really important if you're running Whiz King, because there's a lot of mummies in Whiz King.
Yeah.
They are, however, vulnerable to fire, more so than normally. So that can be a handy one. Although some of them will have fire resistance or fire protection from fire and other things to prevent such things.
Yeah, mummies tend to be pretty easy to hit and kill once you get to hit and kill them. It's just sort of getting to them and doing it in a way that doesn't give you mummy rot is the challenge really with mummies.
They do typically have non-bypassable DR as well.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think they generally take extra damage from light as well, but I'm not positive on that either. You'll find that light damage tends to work pretty well against undead in general. Wraiths are also incorporeal, and if they kill you, they generally will spawn another one.
Yep.
So be aware of that. The spell spawns can come in handy for that.
Is essentially what's happening there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that can be a bit tricky. They come in a fairly wide variety. I've noticed some of them, particularly at lower levels, tend to be mostly melees. But as you get higher in level, they start learning spells and such things. The wraiths that spawn in Temple of Deathworm when you die are particularly nasty because they hit pretty hard and they have a fairly wide variety of spells that they can cast.
I would say wraiths are generally a good reason to have an undead beater that's got Ghostbane or Ghost Touch, Ghostbane most likely on it. If you don't have that somewhere else, because they can kind of phase in and out, and then they're also can dish it out pretty good in terms of damage. And when they are phased in, you can try to hit them, and if you have a 50% miss chance there, you really are impacting your ability to take them down without taking a lot of damage. So I tend to find when the wraiths come out in particular is when I want to make sure I've got something like that.
And I think they're probably the first incorporeal mob that you're gonna find in the game. You can actually fight them as early as Catacombs. You don't have to fight. Well, there's one that you can't kill, but will chase you out of the dungeon, and then you have the option of fighting her later. You don't have to, but you can. And I think that there's a couple running around in the end fight, but I'm not positive on that. It's been a while. But they're all throughout the game. I think they have an enervation attack too, if memory serves correctly.
Yeah.
But they're pretty nasty. I think we didn't notice this either. With incorporeality, you only get the 50% chance to hit them if your weapon is magical. If you still have a masterwork weapon, you shouldn't be able to hit them at all. Fair warning.
And
I don't know if that's actually how it applies.
No, I think it does actually work that way as well. I'm pretty sure that's true.
That's how pen and paper works. Usually, by level 1, you probably have a magical weapon, so it's usually not an issue in DDO, but it's something to be aware of.
Yeah.
Wights are another fairly low-level monster, undead monster. They come in typically a melee version and a caster version. They can neg level you, with their attacks, which can be kind of a pain, but otherwise they're pretty much normal undead mobs. I don't have anything to add about those guys.
They tend to. There's often a lot of them, and they kind of surround you in a group. Once you've fought them for a while, you can kind of, in a lot of cases with DDO, you generally want to target the one mob and then take it down and move to the next mob. But I tend to find when I'm surrounded by a group of wights, they'll kind of have this pause, they'll jump back, then they'll jump back in, take some swings, and jump out. And if you have a group of them, you'll find they're constantly jumping in and jumping out. So rather than say chase every white that's jumping back and swinging on that, I tend to just stay in one place and hit whoever happens to jump closest to me, and then take them out that way. But your mileage may vary on that.
Yeah, I would say with whites too. Watch out for the caster versions because they typically cast Downburst, um,
Yeah.
and typically it's fairly effective at lower levels, which gives you problems there. Weeps are a higher level mob typically. I always think that they should be incorporeal based on looking at them because they kind of float like other ghosts do, but they're not. They do, however, have an AoE fear effect as well as a poison attack, and their DR, I believe, is piercing. If you want to bypass their DR,
They're
some of
also
them are
one of our
casters as well.
creepier. I think they're always one of our creepier looking models in the game too. They've got that nail through their eye. So
I think if I remember correctly, in pen and paper, I think the fear part comes from them wailing, like they actually run around, like crying, very loudly. So, vampires. Vampires can be a bit of a pain. They typically heal at a pretty good clip, although I think that's been toned down a bit over the
yeah.
years. I
Yeah,
remember
back
Church
in
of
the
the Cult.
days. Yeah, right. Back in the day, Church of the Cult and Elite, you'd have the whole party beating on the guy, but your DPS wouldn't be high enough, and you just couldn't take him out. You know.
Well, the problem with that was the vampires can turn into bats and phase. They phase in and out in that manner. Um, so that can be kind of a trick. And what happened with the Church of the Cult guy was you'd beat him down to about 50%, and then he'd go away as bats. And usually the first time they do that, they spawn a couple of wolves as well. But he'd go away and then he'd come back at full, and he'd try and beat him down, and he'd go away and he'd come back at full because his regen was so fast. So it was
You know,
pretty tricky to actually kill him.
if they do turn into wolves, that's what is essentially giving them their DR. So if you kill all the wolves before they turn back into a vampire, you usually take care of their DR as well.
Which is typically silver,
Yeah.
if memory serves. Silver or good, or both, depending on the level of the vampire. They do take extra damage from light. I do know that.
Again, divine punishment for the win.
Yeah, that's a nice one. And there's a couple other spells that can do light damage as well. They also typically drain your constitution in melee, which in Mark of Death is kind of a problem because Doomspheres and vampires running around, and you can end up with 0 constitution pretty quick.
Vampires are also one of the mobs. This is just my personal opinion, and it depends on the mob. But they can be very dangerous if you're trying to range them. They can be very dangerous if you're going toe-to-toe with them. So they tend to be pretty versatile in their ability to deal with, whatever's trying to kill them.
They also come in a very high variety of monsters too. Like there's spellcaster ones, melee, ranged. They're essentially an undead human in that regards. Speaking of undead humans, there are Death Knights in the game. They tend to be immune to cold and electrical damage. However, otherwise they're mostly just kind of beefy humans.
They can be really hard to kill, though. They tend to have a lot of hit points, a high AC.
Decent DR.
Yeah, decent TR. They're actually one of the tougher undead, I think, in the game. They also do. I'm trying to think what the effect is. They have is it neck level. Am I thinking? Am I saying that right?
I don't remember.
They do have like an AOE sort of debuff that they can put on you as well. Let me see if I can find that.
They're significantly less potent than their D&D their pen and paper counterparts. I think I seem to remember like the second edition version of Death Knights were just crazy hard to kill. Let's see, specters. Specters are also incorporeal. They're kind of beefed up versions of Wraiths in a lot of regards. They enervate. They typically cause spawns if you die from them. And they're more or less they're kind of what you would think of more of as a ghost. Like they actually have an avatar that looks kind of humanoid. They're a lot more rare than Wraiths as well. But again, they can be spellcasters or just plain melee, depending on where you find them. And I think last but not least, at least on our list, are Quells. Every divine's favorite undead.
Yeah.
They're incorporeal. They pretty much are always spellcasters, but their kind of big thing is they have an intercession ability. And what that does is it makes it so you can't cast divine spells for about 30 seconds. And there's a couple ways around that. And then if one, you don't cast divine spells, you don't really care. If you're a bard, by the way, your healing is arcane, so you're not subject to intercession. You can also get Intercession Ward, which I believe exists on 2 items in the game: the Epic Glimpse of Soul, and there's a sword that you can get in Heroic Abbot as well, a great sword that has Intercession Ward.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a rundown of the different monsters in a not so fast version. However, there are some other things that we should talk about how to, like, things to protect yourself against undead, and things that may be slightly more effective against undead just in general. I think the first thing we should say is Death Ward, since Death Ward prevents all the negative level stuff from hitting you. So that's pretty nice. Disruption works really well against undead, since it.
There is improved disruption as well.
Yep. There's actually greater disruption, which you can get on a Shroud tier 3 positive or 3 tier positive weapon as well, which is a very, very effective low level undead beater that you can use. I still use mine on my barbarian all the way in epic levels. It is pretty effective as well. It does a lot of damage, positive damage, as well as having disruption on it. The hand wraps out of the what once was the Maybar event and will now be something different are very effective. And the Mutineer's Blade out of Threadbell Cove is very effective as well. So there's kind of some options there.
Yeah, that Mutineer's Blade is great. Yeah. To be honest, your divine classes, despite the issues they have with quills, are generally at a really good position to fight a lot of undead, because they've got Blade Barrier, which is good for just about everything, but is great for a lot of undead, like zombies in particular, that type. They've got a lot of light damage they can do. They've got Divine Punishment, which is huge. They have enhancements and such that allow them to do extra light damage, which is always useful. And then on top of that, although we haven't really gotten into this here, undead can be turned. Now, turning is not is not a huge aspect of DDO right now, but it is something that people who are dedicated to it can get some good use out of, particularly in the heroic levels of the game. I think as you get into epic levels, you start to find more of a challenge in being able to effectively use Turn Undead, although I've seen that done as well. But particularly in the heroic levels, the ability to turn does make a difference. And you can either destroy them outright, or you can essentially make them cower in fear, where they just sort of sit there, unable to move or fight or all that sort of thing. And you can beat up on them that way as well. So, your
if you want
clerics
tips on turning too, our cleric episode a couple episodes ago has a lot of great tips on turning, and also talks about using Sunburst, which is very effective. There's a lot of spells too that you'll notice, or a couple spells that you notice that do extra damage versus undead and oozes, typically light spells, mass light spells.
Otherwise, wizards and sorks are always in a great place. Wall of Fire remains one of the most effective ways to deal with most undead.
Which does double damage against undead. It's part of the description.
Yep.
Unless they're immune to fire, in which case you're kind of host.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to mention too, you can't instantly kill undead other than disruption. Like they're not alive, so slaying spells don't work against them. However, implosion does, because what implosion does is it takes a corporeal body and just implodes it. So you can use that very effectively against undead as well.
To mention, there is another insta-kill spell as well called Undeath to Death. It is a necromancy school for clerics, favored souls, sorcerers, and wizards. It does destroy undead creatures in an area of effect. It is a successful will save to negate. I don't
There's
see
also
it
Halt Undead and Command Undead, which
yep.
are good card control spells as well that are arcane. And then there's also one thing I want to mention too, because the Festival is coming up, and one of the more common things you can get out of those is I can't remember what they're called, but they're like little bottles of light that are throwers that are really effective at low levels because they're ghost touch. They're a throwing weapon, They do a high amount of light damage.
Those are
And
the
if you're
incandescent
a,
candles, right? Maybe.
I don't remember
Yeah.
what they are. I think they're sun flasks. I think is what they're called.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But the really fun thing you can do is if you're a druid, you can equip them, go into animal form, and use it as a melee attack without using charges.
That sounds not good.
It's very effective.
I bet it is. Yeah. All the benefits, none of the cost. Surely that's working as intended.
Just saying, it's been there for ever since we've had the two in the game. So
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
uh,
I'd say that's certainly not working as intended. It is a bug, and it is something that may be fixed someday in the future, or may not,
maybe.
but may. So,
I
yeah.
mean, those things certainly lose their effectiveness at higher levels because you have to hit the monster with them too, which
Mhm.
can be a bit of a trick. And they don't have any like plus enhancement to them at all. So it's just your throwing bonus. So
Yeah.
anything else you want to throw out there for those who are looking to kill some undead?
Hmm. No, not really. I think we pretty well covered it in terms of the rundown of what there is in the game. They can be some of the toughest mobs in the game. I guess there is one other thing we should mention, and that is uh, undead are immune to critical hits.
Yes, that is true. I forgot to mention that as well. And you can
Yeah.
heal them for damage as well. Which, by the way, if you're like a paladin or a cleric, um, be careful of targeting around undead because they will take your lay on hand charges and heal spells, and you will not get the benefit of them. Although it will do damage to them, so be aware of that.
Yeah. All right, I hear a toddler waking up from his nap. I think I need to get to the end of the show here.
Yep.
Sorry.
So lightning post for the week. So this is kind of in response to our episode from last week on hires and pets. Um, there was a couple things that I think we may have misspoke on or were incorrect on that Dictiana pointed out from Sarlona. You can fill your party with hirelings. There is no limit to the number of gold seals you can use as long as they aren't the same hireling, which is good to know. And you can actually summon gold hirelings at 2 levels higher than yourself. So watch out for that if you're doing bravery bonus streaks. Um, let's see. Horatio mentions that he had a Blade Marks docent left over, and he got a lucky draw Weapon Master hand wraps with +5 exceptional combat mastery, and he stuck those on his Artificer dog, and it trips a lot more effectively. So you can do that. And I think I'm not sure if we talked about it very well earlier. We may have forgot to mention that you can right-click on hirelings. I thought we did, but you can right-click on hirelings and customize the UI, including dogs and the dogs now. So that's pretty awesome. And let's see. Livmo also mentioned if you use hires, dogs, wolves a lot, you can save a feat when you get to level 26 if you use the Necklace of Mystic Eidolons. It has augment summoning on them if you upgrade it. So you can swap that feat out if you so desire. You can also get augment summoning on Roderick's wand from the Carnival chain as well. I'm not sure if you have to keep holding it for that to take effect. So let's see. The survey question for the week was from Kirkos. He asked, "What is your favorite pet and its name?" For me, it'd have to either be the little beholders or the little kobolds. Those are kind of my favorite too. Do you have a favorite pet?
Yeah, sorry I dropped out there for a second.
No, that's okay.
Looks like maybe we have some internet wonkiness going on. It's really windy and cold here. I just dropped all of a sudden. The question was, what was
What's
my
your favorite
favorite
pet?
pet? I am a big fan of the frogs. I really like the frogs. I think they have a funny hop. And my favorite pet name, I don't know if I can say it. I have a pet frog named Twerking, and I think it's pretty funny. It
Nice.
amuses myself anyway.
Well, with that, I'll say thanks to Jerry for being on the show, and thanks for everyone for listening to the show, and thanks to those who are currently contributing to DDOcast. Thanks to Turbine and Wizards and Cyber Ears. You can hit us up at DDOcast.com for show notes, our calendar, previous shows, swag, and other fun stuff. I want to be part of the show, just say hi. Email us at DDOcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on social media and follow us for the latest cast updates. The tip for the week comes from Gazunder. Remember to actually use those powerful consumables instead of just sitting on them. That's what they're there for. I am terrible at that.
I
will
am
just
very
say.
terrible at that as well. So, looks like I'm maybe dropping here.
Oh, you're okay so far.
Oh, okay,
That's okay.
okay,
We're at the end of the
whatever
show.
that thing. All right, yep.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, everyone, for joining us. Glad to be here, Patrick. I really do appreciate it. And thanks, everyone, for playing DDO, and I'll see you again soon.
So until next time, may all your attack rolls be crits, all your tests level appropriate. Have fun, and don't forget to play DDO Guild Feud. Win some prizes.